In this lesson, we're going to talk about how to prepare for the AWA. So the first question we should be asking is, how much time should I spend preparing for AWA? There's no perfect answer to this question, but you probably should not be spending a lot of time on this task. As a percentage of your overall GRE study, maybe 10 to 20% of your total study time should be dedicated to AWA. But remember, your verbal score, your quant score, those are going to matter much more in your overall application package. So, does my AWA score matter at all then? And again, the answer here is yes and no. Your score could matter if you put up a bad score. If you score a 0 or a 1 or a 2, that might be a red flag to a program. It either means you didn't try, or it means that you really are incapable of communicating in written English, both of which may be a red flag again to your program. But if you do put up a good score, or an average score, a 3, a 4, a 5, that usually isn't going to make much of a difference to the programs you're applying to. Why is that? So how do schools use these scores? They don't really use them that much. Again, they probably use them more as a red flag than they do as something that is going to boost your application. The reason for this is there are better ways for the programs you're applying to evaluate your writing. You're going to submit personal statements. You're going to submit essays. These are the ways in which your programs will really know if you are able to communicate in written English. And so they don't put as much of an emphasis on your AWA score, so long as you're able to post an average score, a 3 or a 4. Next, let's talk about timing. So we're going to go ahead here and look at some rough timing guidelines. First, and this is going to be the most important step, brainstorming and outlining. And when we're really good at this task, we should be able to accomplish these two things within 3 to 5 minutes, the first 3 to 5 minutes that we sit down for this task. Now that's not going to happen at first, and we're going to have later lessons that we really dive in on how do I go about brainstorming for each individual essay, the issue essay and the argument essay. But at a high level, your target should be that you can brainstorm and outline each essay in 3 to 5 minutes. Next is writing your essay, and this is going to be where you spend the bulk of your time. You can see here we've allotted 20 to 25 minutes. Now we're not going to give you some sort of time breakdown for how long to spend on an intro and on your body paragraphs and your counter arguments and conclusions. That's too granular. That's going to change from person to person. But you should just be planning to spend the bulk of your time in this task writing. So 20 to 25 minutes of just writing. And lastly, we're going to leave maybe a little time for editing. You'll notice here that it might be 0 minutes. We might not have any time for editing. This is going to come down to your writing skills. If you can write very cleanly and error-free, you probably don't need to spend any time editing. If your document would be filled with red and green lines, if we were to put it through spell check and grammar check, then you probably want to make sure you budget yourself a couple minutes to go back and edit so that your essay presents in a way that is readable and accessible to the grader. Lastly, we're going to talk about evaluating your essay. Now you will see this rubric here on your screen, but before we jump into that, let's talk about some easier ways to evaluate your own writing. First, you can compare your essay against other sample essays that are written. So you can find some of these on the ETS website. You can find lots of them in your Magoosh product when you are studying for AWA. Another great resource is to just ask a friend or ask someone who is also studying for the GRE with you. That is a great way to compare your essays. You could see what other students are doing, you can get feedback from them, and you can collaborate to really figure out how you are doing with this particular task. And then lastly, you can try to use this rubric here. Now this may be a little intimidating for some of you, so don't worry about this too much. You don't need to use this at a high level to evaluate your work. This should just be like rough guidance for am I in the ballpark of some of these scoring marks. If we look at some of the categories here, quality of ideas, if we think to our 4 components that will be scored on for AWA, This ties into our thesis writing. This ties into our supporting body paragraphs. That's our quality of ideas. Organization. That is its own scoring component, so it's pretty clear what we're being asked for when we're scoring organization here. Then the next two columns, writing style and grammar and usage and mechanics. So these probably go together into our one scoring component of writing well, of writing cleanly and error-free. This is a great tool, again, to just give yourself a rough sense of where you stand in regard to the scoring rubric, but don't overdo it trying to apply this as thoroughly as possible. This is just rough guidance again. The big thing to take away here is if you can be in that 3 to 4 range, you're probably in good shape for the programs you're applying to. And so that's how you can go about preparing for AWA at a high level. In the coming lessons, we're going to jump into the specifics of each essay and how we can go about formatting and acing those essays.